You're listening to The Real Deal Conversations, a podcast designed to encourage, inspire, and equip you by sharing real stories and meaningful conversations that bring real life to the surface. I'm your host, Megan Deal. Let's dive in. Our speaker today has been featured by the New York Times, Good Morning America, and Oprah. He's renowned for his documentary TV series on A&E that followed his groundbreaking work with youth and families. He's the author of the national bestseller, The Grown-Up's Guide to Teenage Humans, and he completed his postgraduate studies at Harvard University. But most of all, he enjoys talking to strangers at Walmart. Please welcome Josh Shipp.
Hey, here we are. Such a formal, fancy introduction. I do love Walmart. I grew up in Oklahoma. There's many a Walmart there.
Yes, I went to school in Oklahoma City. Yeah, so there is lots of flat land and Walmart.
Yes, the town I grew up in when I was growing up, we didn't even have a Starbucks, and then there was plans to develop a Starbucks, and many folks thought, okay, now the town is just absolutely going to crap. We're getting the corporate Starbucks, but it has since grown quite a bit.
To a Starbucks and maybe just a Scooters?
Maybe like 3 Starbucks. Yes.
That's awesome.
Yeah, the corporate overlord of caffeine has taken over Yukon, Oklahoma.
I love it. Well, Josh, so when we had talked in email a little bit, I had shared with you that my heart was to walk through your story, the kids who have been in foster care, the kids who have walked that journey, and for the parents who have a foster child, the parents who are thinking about fostering, anything in that space. How can we encourage them? How can we help them be seen? How can we make them be, feel known? And walking through this journey in that perspective, knowing that a diverse group will listen, but our heart today is to see the ones who are in the middle, who are coming out of, it's part of their history, and let's see them today.
Indeed. Yeah, I think particularly, I guess to start, for foster parents that take in foster kids, there are these tricky moments where they will often, as I did as a foster kid, push back on that parent for something that parent did not cause. So sort of earlier trauma, earlier fear, earlier things that were instilled in that kid through some form of neglect, abuse, trauma, abandonment, whatever it may be, that often bubbles to the surface. And, I've been on both sides of this. I've been the kid in care, and now I'm the adult, often working with these sorts of kids. And it's very disarming as the adult, because you go, the reaction seems so outsized. It seems, there was just a little thing that happened. Hey, I said we were going to leave at 9. We didn't leave till 9:15. Why is there such an emotional response to something to me that just seems trivial or maybe just slightly annoying? And in these moments as that adult, it's very tempting to take it personally, to think that we've done something wrong, that it's something that we caused or did. And of course, we're not going to be perfect as adults, but I say what kids do not talk out, they act out. And for kids in care and for kids who have been through trauma, that is particularly true. Particularly true. And, looking back on my own life, that's something, there are many things I look back at with regret, but that is one in particular that I realized growing up in care that, I just tore through a lot of foster homes and pushed away a lot of people, not because they had done anything wrong, but because wrong things had been done to me prior to me entering their home. And I essentially acted out on them, as I said.
Well, I think, so for me, I've not been in foster care. I have not transitioned from home to home, but I sometimes just switching gears can be hard for me. And so I look at it as like this perspective of, if you have been completely uprooted, like if you've been completely uprooted from everything you've known on a whim, I've had people on the podcast, they talk about their children, they are living in freedom from addiction. They are no longer in that, but their children were placed in foster care. And they talk about their children being taken from their arms by the police into the car. And And so I guess what I'm trying to say is for people who have not had that traumatic background, think about how hard it is for us to switch gears sometimes, and then put yourself in the shoes of a child who is being constantly uprooted. And so what did that look like in your headspace? What did that look like for you as a child? You know, what were the fears? What were some of the things that caused that state of anxiety besides the obvious? Help us step into the shoes of a child who has just entered a home.
Yeah, I was left by my biological mother at a very early age, and so even though I was so young, I don't recall the details of that day, that early abandonment. And, I will say as an adult, I had to do my own work to forgive her and not judge her. I don't know her details. My life might have ended up more difficult had I stayed with her. But regardless, the moment of that abandonment kind of sent a message to my brain that said, basically, don't trust adults, because what adults will do is they'll eventually give up on you and they'll walk away from you. And that is very painful, obviously. And, I've seen kids have a variety of actions. Some kind of flip in and some flip out, depending on their personality and how they want to cope. I was of the type that I thought, I'm going to flip out. I think we can use trauma as a sword or as a shield. So we can use it later in life as something to protect ourselves. Sometimes we can use it to protect ourselves too much. We can use our trauma as a shield to make excuses for things that we are choosing to do now that's foolish, that's idiotic, that's my responsibility. And I can blame it on, I'm doing that idiotic thing because my mother left me 40 years ago. But some kids, and this was me, will use it as a sword, as a way to attack first, to hit first, as a way to protect from that extraordinary pain and fear that I felt in abandonment. And so when I would enter a home, that was my goal, was to use my trauma as a sword to find the vulnerability point in these parents, to stab that metaphorically as quickly as possible. I never got physical with anybody, so that they would want to go, yeah, this kid, he should probably find a different home. And when it would come to that, it wasn't sad. It was my objective. That was my goal. And you can just see what broken, unfortunate, but sort of understandable thinking that could be, is that to move in, I thought, well, if they're going to get rid of me anyway, let me at least have some semblance of control here, and let me be the one that drives the separation instead of being surprised by the separation.
And rejected again.
Correct. Yeah, that I thought I can never again will I be rejected. That was so pain. I will do whatever necessary to not feel that feeling again, because that was too intense.
Yeah.
Far too much.
And so as an adult so let's kind of go with that rejection. As an adult, how do you navigate? Because not everybody who has walked through that as an adult has taken the steps necessary to heal, to, reach out and to heal. What would you say to them in that space of rejection where they are still hurting people as adults? How did you navigate that as an adult to heal?
Well, I kind of used my trauma as a sword for essentially 14 years. I would get into a home, I would act out, and within a matter of months or weeks, I would get moved to the next home. And again, this is not at all to guilt any of those parents that said, hey, we didn't sign up for this. Their position is completely understandable. At 14, I moved in with what I thought would just be sort of the next set of foster parents that I would move in, irritate them, quickly move out. And these folks were absurdly immovable, absurdly unbothered, almost sort of stoic to a certain degree. They wouldn't get too hopeful and excited by my great days where I was sort of behaving and showing some progress. I don't know how they did this. I later asked them when I became an adult, but they wouldn't get irritated, bothered, or here's the most difficult one, take it personally.
Yeah.
when I would act out, when I would do something stupid, when I would do something rambunctious, when I would, do something to try to push them away. They almost expected that, didn't take it personally, weren't bothered by it. And we're like, hey, we have this plan. We're in here for the long haul with you. You can keep acting a fool. You can, keep acting the way you're acting. We're just going to kind of stand back until you wear yourself out, because we know you will eventually wear yourself out, and we're still going to be here. I mean, again, metaphorically, it's almost like I was just this angry, defiant kid just throwing punches in the air, and they wisely didn't get close enough to me to get hit. Again, this is all metaphorical. They also didn't run out of the room. That's what a lot of folks prior did. And again, understandably, they took a healthy step back, having personal healthy boundaries. They knew, hey, we have to protect ourselves. We have to protect our own sanity. But we're just going to stand here while you wear yourself out. So keep doing whatever. We're going to punish you also, by the way. When you do dumb things, we will punish you. So
what did that look like when they had to give you consequences? How did you react? Because some kids in that space, like there's severe defiance, or there's, I've heard somebody told me a few weeks ago, they have children who are in foster care, and consequences and all of that is very difficult for them. It's very difficult. And that's what's wearing them down as foster parents.
I mean, look, I would argue, even if I grew up in a quote ideal upbringing, what 15-year-old enjoys consequences in the moment? So that's layer one. I think traumatic upbringing or not, no 15-year-old's going to be a big fan of consequences. I will say the first couple times that they appropriately punished me, it felt very foreign to me. Because having a consequence that was right-sized for my behavior, and I would have never dared told them this in the moment. It felt very safe. It felt like I have guardrails with these folks. They're not going to ignore my potential. Okay, lots of folks can do that. But they're also not going to turn a blind eye to my stupidity. And I personally, with that kind of acting out, using my trauma as a sword, found that, and again, I wouldn't have dared told them this.
Yeah.
I found that absurdly comforting, because I felt like I am in the hands of capable pilots. They know what they're doing. I might not always like it, but there are guardrails with these folks. So the first couple times I would blow up. I'd get louder. I could tell you many stories, but one thing I remember in particular, I did something, I think I yelled at a teacher at school. I kind of had an outsized reaction, teacher at school. Come home, they talked to me about it. Hey, this is not okay. You can't go anywhere for a week, and you need to go in and apologize face-to-face to that teacher. We're not going to do it for you. You need to do it. We can rehearse it if you want, but we're not going to do it for you. You need to go do that. I got super mad. This is ridiculous. I'm not doing that. My foster mother walks into the backyard. I then lock her out of the house. I then pull back the drape of the back door. I wave at her. I'm just thinking, this is hilarious. Hilarious.
Yeah.
She goes around the house, comes in the front door. Hey, that is not okay. You cannot do that. I then go in my bedroom, slam the door. She says, we don't slam doors in our house. I slam it again. We don't slam doors in our house. Yeah. Rodney, my foster dad, says, hey, you heard her. We don't slam doors in the house. You do that again, you're not going to have a door. I slam the door again. They take the door off the hinges.
Yeah.
They literally take the door off the hinges. So I would, those first handful of times when met with consequences, part of me would go, this is nice. This is what I've needed. Some structure. Again, it's not so much a consequence, but consequence is one half of structure. It is one half of guardrails. I think the other side is kind of that encouragement side, that tender side, that, hey, you're more than your background, you're more than your trauma, you're more than your past. But that consequence is half of it. And so part of me felt like, oh, this feels really comfortable. And part of it felt very foreign to me. So I would escalate it. I would escalate it almost as if to say, I don't believe you. This feels too good to be true to me. Yeah. So let me just make sure you're for real.
Yeah.
Let me because other people have tricked me that they're for real. I don't believe you. I'd escalate it. They would stay calm. They would, up the consequence if necessary, like taking the door off the hinges.
Yeah.
It's totally hilarious now.
Speaking of, not for you, but for my own kids, I have a 14-year-old, 12-year-old, and 8-year-old. And the other day I went in and I was like, hey, I'm really sorry for being an a-hole. That wasn't cool. But what in the consequences, what would be a wrong way, even if it seemed like okay to do with a child, but with a child who has trauma, what is some wrong ways to address consequences?
Yeah, I'd rather kind of tell you what the right ways are. So, again, using Rodney and Christine as a model. My whole thesis in life, every kid is one caring adult away from being a success story. Mm-hmm. That's what Rodney and Christine were to me. That's why I have the biography that you introduced me with. Anything impressive or stable that I have in my life, whether it be some shiny career success that gets you on a podcast, or just the fact that I've been married 21 years, that we have 2 kids, that I have the ability to have, again, I'm not a perfect parent. I screwed up as well. I also have to apologize to my own children. I too still have outsized reactions occasionally, but any stability in my life is because of them. Mm-hmm. So what they would do, the ways in which I would act out were pretty predictable after I'd been there for a few months. Mm-hmm. So there would be 3 or 4 categories of things I would tend to do. So they wrote down, literally on paper, here are the rules of the home. Here are just a handful of rules. They asked me what kind of privileges I would be interested in. Those were real fun to discuss. Hey, on the weekend, I'd like to be able to, go out, stay out till X o'clock. So privileges were also kind of bullet pointed and listed. And this I recognize how wise this is now being a parent myself. Premeditated consequences. Because being a parent myself now and working with parents, what's tricky is that when your kid inevitably does something stupid and then it comes time for you to step in and teach them through a consequence, it's very easy in that moment to underreact or overreact. Again, depending on your personality. Megan, it sounds like you, similar to me. If I'm not careful, I will overreact. I rarely underreact. My 99% of my challenges in life are going to be in overreacting. Yep. So in having premeditated consequences, it helps me. It's not guaranteed, but it sure helps me to not overreact, because these consequences are defined during a moment of peace, not a moment of war. Because in a moment of war, right, as a parent, even if you're a great parent, well-intended, you're irritated, you're pissed off, you got other stuff going on. This is not what I need to deal with today. And so you can either kind of flip out and over-punish, or flip in, do nothing, which is only going to sort of reinforce that behavior. So looking back, I think that is a very brilliant and empowering thing that they did with me that I think would work with particularly preteens, teenagers, and older, which is just laying it out in writing. What are just a handful of rules? What are a handful of privileges you'd like to have? And yes, you can have those if you follow these handful of rules. And if you make a mistake, and by the way, we expect you to eventually, we know you will. Here's what we're going to do in advance, just so you know. We're not going to surprise you. We're not going to blindside you. Yeah. We're not going to ignore it. And we're going to do our best not to ground you for 9 months for something that is appropriate for 2 weeks.
Yeah. No, that's really good. I love that.
Very practical, very helpful.
Yeah. No, that's good. So with children, so one of the things with behavior that you are very big on, and I love this, and I am our community engagement specialist at Big Brothers Big Sisters. And so we're one-to-one mentorship, and we see this all the time where when somebody comes alongside a child, it significantly changes them. I mean, it's real cool. And so we love what you promote, and that's take the behavior and harness it and direct the arrow another way. So can you share a little bit about what does that look like? Because in the moment, a parent, when you're dealing with the hard behavior, the negative behavior, it's really hard to stop, breathe, and see, okay, how can we channel this? So what are some good tools and tips for parents in that space to channel it? And some tips for parents, do they need to walk away for a little bit? Let's look at that.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about kind of two categories of behavior. One would be quite defiant. And then I think another category is just sort of irritating or slightly annoying behavior. For the, for the more oppositional sort of big behaviors, like some of the stuff I did early on as a kid in care, again, like we just discussed, having premeditated rules, privileges, consequences is going to be incredibly helpful because, again, you're not making decisions at the moment where you're very, very irritated or very, very heated. That's going to be good for everybody. That kind of gets everyone on the same page. There's no surprises. And particularly for a kid in care, what they need more than anything is certainty. Any way in which you can communicate, express to them certainty. Hey, I'm dependable. Hey, you can kind of know what you're going to get with me. I'm not, kids in care, even me as an adult now, and I've done a lot of therapy and all that. I don't like surprises. I don't like surprises because of the way in which I grew up. So that's thing number one. Secondly, with that kind of outsized behavior is not taking it personally, which means you got to have an escape valve by which you can process these feelings. So that could be anything from, having a therapist that you could talk to, or, and this is something my foster parents would do, is they would get together every couple of weeks with another group of foster parents. They'd go out for a beer or for a coffee, and they would just vent. They would vent. They would just complain about me, and everyone kind of go around, complain about the frustrations, the irritations. And I remember my foster mother said, that did two really powerful things I didn't expect it to do. I just thought, well, it'd be nice to go out for a coffee with some adults. Said, number one, it helped me realize we're not alone in these struggles. So it really removed that veil of shame and isolation. And shame gets worse in isolation. You think, this is just happening in my home. I must not be very good at this. I watched some movie. I watched Instant Family. I thought, all right, let's get in a foster kid. I bring him in, and now all hell's breaking loose, and I feel really shameful about that. But hearing from these other parents, things they were going through, even though the details were different than what my parents were going through, they thought, okay, we're not alone. This is not something we have to be shameful of. And then secondly, they would get a bit of hope because inevitably, as they were going around the circle, just kind of sharing and venting, someone would have a little bit of good news to share. And it typically wasn't like, hey, turned to me and said, I love you, and said, thank you so much for, instilling consequences and discipline in my life because I recognize that's what I need to unfurl the trauma of which I've been through in life. Again, no 15-year-old's going to say that, but they would say something like, we said this thing to him and he didn't blow up. He just grunted and walked away. That's great. Okay. So there's hope for us too. Yeah. And so in getting together with just peer groups of parents like that, you can have both. It can minimize the shame or overwhelm that you sometimes might feel, and also give you those points of hope. Because I would argue what you can't do with any kid, it is not an appropriate responsibility to put on any kid, particularly a kid in trauma, is reassurance of how you're doing as a parent. No 8-year-old, 11-year-old, 14-year-old, 17-year-old is capable of that. That is not their responsibility. Your certainty in what you're doing needs to come from within or from other adults, but not from that kid. There's a difference between being stupid and being ignorant. At that age, they are ignorant. It doesn't mean they're stupid, but they're ignorant. They are not yet mature enough and have the perspective enough to say to you, hey, I know most of the time I don't seem like I'm listening or like I appreciate what you're doing. They just can't. Those are the sorts of things they will circle back to you when they're 30.
Yeah.
And say to you, so we cannot take our cues. We cannot have a feedback loop that is dependent upon that kid, particularly if that kid has been through trauma.
Sure. And I mean, it's already hard enough for them to explain just how their day was and to give a detailed explanation of just how their day was.
Yes, sure.
So definitely not likely to give them an explanation of who you are to them. And also it kind of makes me think too about how you said in the moments where the consequence and stuff, you're like, this feels safe. But there was also there was like that tension and that wrestle with it's safe, but this is, there's this other side of it. And so, but they didn't know you felt safe in that moment. And so again, it kind of makes me think where they're not going to express it to you, even if they do feel like it. And it's going to come out possibly something totally different. And I always go back to, if we as adults have a hard time regulating, if we as adults have a hard time communicating, if we just think about the things you as an adult, whoever's listening, me, what do you have a hard time with? And you're an adult. Imagine a kid who hasn't even, their brain's not fully formed until 25. They're just navigating their hormones. And if we as adults struggle, how much more grace do they need to walk through that and to feel that and kids even more so who have had extreme turmoil in their life. Yes. I feel like we really need to take a step back. And I think it's exactly what you're saying. I think in general, adults, we have a huge problem with ego. And so we filter things through our ego. And if we can just stop filtering things through our ego, I think things would go a lot smoother, not perfect, but I feel like somewhat smoother,
Yeah, it's hard to do. There are days where I have to punish my own children and they don't like that. And sometimes they'll act out and they will say things verbally to me that sting me. And, sometimes I do take that quite personally, even though here I am being a hypocrite. I'm advising others to not take it personally. But of course, there are days I take that personally. But if my stability as a parent depends on them, I'm screwed. I am screwed. I am not there to, my kid is not my friend currently. They will be later as adults. That is a goal. But for now, they're not my friend. They're my responsibility.
Yeah.
And so my responsibility is to have friends outside of my children that can encourage me when necessary, that can call me out if I am being foolish or looking at the situation in an unfair way or a critical way or being inconsiderate or not caring. But, when I look back now and think about my foster parents, I think if I was to sum it up into 5 words, the magic of what they did, very simple to understand, but not simple to do, consistent encouragement and consistent consequences.
Yeah.
That's it. Now, when I say that's it, again, 5 words, simple to understand, absurdly difficult to do. And to get that right balance day in and day out, the research suggests, and find this true in my own life, that as adults, we tend to more naturally do one or the other of those pretty naturally. So if your kid is hurting and you're, my first thought is always if my kid's hurting or in a tough situation, I always think more structure, more boundaries. What sort of strategy do they need? My wife might think more like, hey, they need to be encouraged. Their heart's kind of hurting here. What's going on? But both of those things, not just one from the dad and one from the mom, if a kid is in that situation of a 2-parent household, but embodied in the same adult, an adult who can both give the kid encouragement and give the kid consequences. That is it. That is it. And then patience. And patience, again, depends on you not burning out, which is why you not taking cues from your kid and grades from your kid on how you were doing is so critical. Because if you do, you will burn out. If you do, you will pump the brakes or just go, I must not be being very effective because they don't seem to be appreciative of what I'm doing right now.
Yeah. And what are some ways in building the relationship with when a child is coming into your home, what are some ways to build that relationship with them? If you can go back and think, what did younger Josh need in that moment relationally, trust-wise? Let's tell them what it is they can do to make that positive.
Yeah, I mean, outside of the fundamental things, I think we would all assume. I'll talk about a couple nuanced and unusual things that folks did that really meant a lot to me. There was a home I moved into. When I moved in, there's like a sticky note, put my name on the door. That meant a ton to me. That just this, again, coming from some of the situations I'd come from, group homes, these sorts of things, having my own space was very, very helpful. Secondly, I struggled a lot with, in some of these homes I would live in, they would be not that healthy, slightly abusive, and there would be situations where there would be limited food, a lot of kids, and kind of a mad rush to like just shove down the food so that you got enough to eat. And when I moved in with Rodney and Christine, they were somehow aware of that behavior, and they gave me a mini fridge in my room with a lock on it. And just that comfort of, because as a kid, I would sneak food from the kitchen of these homes I would live in. I would go hide it in my room. It would rot. I would forget where I stored stuff away. So even just kind of being curious, not furious, being curious about, okay, so we hear in some of these other homes, they find a bunch of rotting food in his room. Again, understandably, that would be an irritant as a parent, as a foster parent, but getting curious, what would cause someone to do that? I wonder if there's ever been that. Well, what could we do? Let's give him a space that's appropriate where he can store some things away so that he knows he has enough that can just be his. That was, I remember, a very unusual gesture that they made. Cost them some money, some inconvenience. And I can't tell you how much that meant to me. Those sorts of things helped calm me down and not have me on edge and on guard all the time, so that I could then eventually get into dealing with my trauma. Yeah. Get into accepting help, get into going to a counselor, get into parsing where I need to forgive people that have hurt me, and where the line is now, I'm the one making choices and hurting other people. I'm acting out. I'm, saying rude things to my foster parents, to teachers at school. But having some of those basic needs taken care of, and not just taken care of, because again, you would think, okay, they were going to feed me. So it'd be real easy to go, all right, check that box. But because of my background, I needed a little more than that. I needed reassurance that I was going to have food. And that little gesture of a Walmart mini fridge and a lock, probably all in $80, helped me calm down. And then I could begin to kind of work and untangle some of this trauma.
So learning the triggers, defusing the triggers, thinking outside of the box, and how to do that. I think that's amazing.
Yeah, that's well said.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love that. Let's in school. So, like I was telling you about my friend who's, alternative teacher, and how can we see kids in the school space? School's not built like school. It's built for like one type of kid. I feel it's built for the neurotypical, and that's it. How do we see the kids in the school space because trauma it comes in all forms. It comes in all forms, and it's diverse homes. It's not just your impoverished homes. It's not your foster homes. It's your $1 million homes. Yep. And people tend to forget that. And so how do we help the kids and see the kids in that space as a teacher?
Yeah. So, at home, I was quite defiant. At school, I was quite irritating and annoying. I got made fun of a lot in kind of, 5th grade, 6th grade. I one day popped off to a teacher, unknowingly made the whole class laugh, and became addicted to that, became addicted to using laughter as a shield, as a way to protect myself from being someone who would get made fun of. And so I became very obsessed with that, got quite good at making the class laugh. And then I sort of fed that incessantly, and would just, instead of occasionally making a joke or two, it was just constant. So this is not okay. This is not okay behavior. This is super disruptive to the other kids and very disruptive to the teacher's plan and curriculum, of course. And, again, that might feel like a bit more, it wasn't as kind of disruptive of an acting out, but it was an acting out. And so I remember I had a Spanish teacher who, I think about this idea of being tough and tender. We have to be tough and tender with kids. Again, another way to say consistent encouragement and consistent consequences. Mm-hmm. She pulls me out of the hall yet again because I'm, disrupting middle school Spanish class. And she says, listen, under no circumstance can you continue to do this. This is just, you are funny, but you're derailing these kids. You guys are middle schoolers. You can't just pull it back together. This is not okay. It's not. It's just not. She said, but you're kind of funny. People listen to you. She said, have you ever thought about joining speech and debate? There's this speech and debate club in school. I'd never thought about that. I didn't even know that existed. I didn't know what that was. But she saw, and mind you, she was not the speech and debate coach, but she used her influence as a teacher to kind of get me in the room of a place that she hypothesized might change my life and actually change my behavior. And
really?
So, yes. Well, because then I got in speech and debate. I joined it. I said, okay, I'll go try it. It's like an after school thing. And then the whole thing there is like communicating words, making jokes, being clever, being a wise ass, all these kind of things that I was doing and getting in trouble for.
Yeah.
This was like a healthy outlet for that. So then I could get in there, wear myself out doing all that, get most of that out of my system, not all of it. I don't want to overpaint a rosy picture, but get a lot of it out of my system.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't tell you how foundational and catalytic of a moment that conversation in the hallway was. Now, here's where I would challenge anyone in education. Mrs. Wilhite, that Spanish teacher, the only thing she was required to do was probably pull me out in the hallway and say, you got to knock it off. That would probably be if she was getting a performance review, she did what she was required to do.
Yeah.
But she went a little bit further, a sentence or two further. She was curious, not furious.
Yeah.
She thought, I wonder, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he'll hate it. Maybe he won't even do it.
Yeah.
Maybe he won't even try it. Maybe he'll just, maybe I will have to eventually get him out of my class. But let me at least make the gesture, the offer.
Yes.
Let me try to see something good in this. I think about what if a kid's greatest annoyance is actually their biggest talent in disguise? And I've seen this time and time and time and time and time and time again with the kids I work with my own kids. Oftentimes those things that just drive us nuts about them, it's like that irritating behavior is 3 degrees away from being something they could be great at, that could be something in which they contribute, something in which they are additive to their environment instead of distractory in their environment. And that's what Mrs. Wilhite gave me that day by being curious, by taking a risk, going, well, let me extend this to him. Let's see. Getting in speech and debate, that changed everything for me.
There was a guy that called several months ago, called the office, and he had, when he was younger, he was super rambunctious, like just super rambunctious, so high energy. And he had a big brother, suggested that he join wrestling. And so he literally joined only because his big had suggested it. And that was when he was little. And as an adult, he was inducted into the Wrestling Hall of Fame.
My goodness.
The power of just somebody, I don't know why we overlook it so much. I don't know why we overlook like the power in that. What she did was like, what, a 30-second suggestion?
Yeah.
What he did to the guy who was in the wrestling, like a 30-second suggestion.
Yes.
It takes little. It takes little.
Yes.
It takes little to be big.
Yes. You do have to zoom out though and have perspective, right? Because 2 things are true. Thing A, I was being annoying in her class and it is not appropriate.
Correct.
Thing A is still true.
Yes.
And still unacceptable. And just because a kid's been in trauma doesn't mean they get to act however they want to in class. But thing B, she had a little perspective. She didn't take it personal. And she thought, let me just suggest this. And again, there will be times you suggest things and they fall on deaf ears. The kid tries it. It's not their thing. that is not your responsibility. If we blame ourselves for a young person's failure, then we will also blame ourselves for their success. Neither is on us. Our responsibility as the adult is consistent encouragement, consistent consequences, and I really see what she did as just sort of almost like remixing this irritant and saying, maybe there's something in here. Maybe there's a way in which he could use this for good. And so, for many of us, we can probably really easily list off the things that bug us about our kids. I could certainly very easily list off the things that bug me about my kids. And those things are still true. It is not wise advice to say, lie to yourself. Just pretend those things aren't there. They are. And also ask yourself, what would it look like if those things were used for good? What would it look like if those things were harnessed, not to bug others or not to bug us, but what would it look like if they were just slightly pointed in a different direction and used for good? And then just begin to get, is there anything out there that could develop that? Is there anything out there that could be the gateway drug for them of that positive thing that would get them interested and curious in that? And, use your leverage, your resource to get them into that thing, because that thing might be the thing, like me, like speech and debate, that not only changes their life, but also helps them self-regulate.
Yeah.
I'm convinced there's no amount of nagging a teacher could have done to get me to behave. What compelled me to behave was to have an outlet for it, like speech and debate, where I could use it in a good way. And then because I had a thing at school that I quite liked, now I was self-motivated to not get in trouble, because then I wouldn't get to go on the trip for the speech and debate thing. Before it's like, well, if I get kicked out of class, who cares? Actually, that's great. Send me home. That'd be great. That'd be great. That'd be great. Mm-hmm. Whereas now I had something at school that was for me, that I liked, that I enjoyed.
Yeah. And what, in the school format, what would you encourage, aside from what we just talked about, how would you encourage a teacher in the classroom space to navigate challenging behaviors? Yeah,
I think it comes down to being tough and tender. You cannot sacrifice the good of 30 students in a classroom, because even if you got a big heart, there's this one kid and a bit of his background and his story, you still have to draw the line there. But I would, in any way you can, get curious and see, is there something here that I can help this kid see beyond their behavior? There was that history teacher that I popped off to. He made a great bargain with me. He's like, you got to work with me here. We can't be doing this. He said, if you calm down, pipe it down during class, I'll give you the last 2 minutes of class every Wednesday and Friday. You can get up there and talk if you want. Keep it appropriate, but I'll give you the last 2 minutes. But you got to give me the first 58.
I love that.
Okay, that's our bargain. Now again, not everyone's going to have that luxury. Yeah. You might have 10 kids that are disrupting. So you go, well, I can't give each of the 10 kids 2 minutes.
Sure.
But trying to get creative in any way in which you can and say, hey, A, what you're doing is not appropriate, but B, I see you and there's something good in you, even though what you're doing right now is not okay. Like, you are okay, but this current behavior is not okay. And so, when I look back, teachers that were tough and tender, that drew the line with me, I very much respected teachers that would draw the line with me. And I absolutely adore and look back on with so much appreciation those teachers that would get curious and, try to make something good of my behavior.
And when you were, when you appreciated and respected them doing that, getting tough on you, did you show that in the moment though?
My goodness, of course not.
Okay. So to say that, because I want the teachers to be encouraged to hear the mindset, but just because the outside doesn't match, don't give up.
Yes.
And I think that's why it's so important for them to hear that you respected them on the inside, even though the outside didn't match. Because I think it's really easy for people to stop planting seeds because they don't see the growth. And it's the power of planting seeds over and over again. And I think this is the perfect example. Plant the seed anyway. Again, it's not about us. It's about the kid. Plant the seed anyway. And eventually, look at Josh. There's a huge bloom. And he's talking about all the seeds that were planted in his life that those people probably didn't even realize at the time, that internally he was thinking this is safe. Internally, he's thinking, I respect this. And how many of those people, probably didn't even know until they hear you talk today that those seeds were being heard. And so hear this, guys. Read between the lines of what is being said here and understand your influence, what you're doing, the things you're saying, how you're saying it. Seeds will plant life or they will plant death. And even though you don't see the fruit in the immediate, plant the seed that gives life.
Agreed. Yeah, you cannot judge in real time what history will prove over time. You can't. No mind can recognize in real time what is happening. And so that's why your only hope is just to stay in the game, remain consistent encouragement, consistent consequences. And then what the kid will do with that is not your responsibility. Your responsibility is the consistency. That's on us as the adults. What the kid does with that, that's on them. For good or bad. That is on them. That is something outside of our control. What we can control is consistent encouragement, consistent consequences. That makes such a world of difference.
Yes. And we're going to kind of wrap it up here. What would you say in two ways? What would you say to somebody who's about to go into, deciding, should we do foster, what's taking those classes? What would you say to encourage them? And what would you say to somebody who is older, has been through the foster care system, but has not yet started their healing journey?
All right. So to the first person, if someone's interested in being a foster parent, that's something that you need to feel called and convicted to do. That's not something you should ever be guilted into by, hearing someone's story, watching a movie, reading some book. That is something that you need to feel called into, because there are a variety of ways in which you can help foster kids. And one of them is being a foster parent, but there's also a variety of ways. You could be a big brother, big sister to someone who is a kid in care. You could be a support to a foster family in your community. You could say, hey, we're going to bring you food once a week because y'all got a lot going on. And we're not in a position right now to take kids in our home, but we could certainly bring y'all a meal to give you a little bit of reprieve. So there are a variety of ways in which you can make a difference to kids in care and to the adults that support those kids in care. If you're going to bring a kid in your home, I think my number one piece of advice would be, don't take their behavior personally. It's not about you. It's not your fault. It is the fault of someone or some situation prior to you even bringing them in your home. I moved in with Rodney and Christine when I was 14 years old. I show up on their doorstep with 14 years worth of baggage. And I do not mean luggage. I had a single backpack that I carried around. 14 years worth of baggage and trauma and nonsense and things that they did not cause, that they would have to help me unpack over the next years of my life living with them. And it's going to be really, really easy to take it personally. It's going to be very tempting to take it personally. Do not take it personally. It is not on you. Just stay consistent with that kid. To the second group, folks that are older that maybe went through care or went through some sort of trauma, haven't begun to deal with it. If I was to say one single thing that was, looking back, incredibly helpful to me, it would be go to a therapist, go to a counselor. There are, depending on, if you're still involved in care, you can sometimes get that paid for. These days, there are lots of great online resources where you can talk to someone who's a trained professional. I always thought counseling is stupid. It's for really, really broken people. I don't want to admit I'm that. But looking back, I realized counseling is not for the broken. It's for the breathing. Everyone needs it. What it gives you is perspective of what is yours to own and what is yours to let go of, what you need to take responsibility for, what your triggers are. And if you with the things that you've already endured, with what you've gone through, if now you can have a healthy perspective and not be bitter and not be a victim to your past, but rather use it as something to fuel you to move forward, to create a different future for yourself. Your potential is unlimited, but it will not be unlimited if you are weighed down by the things of the past, by the things that you did not cause, by the people, the situations, the circumstances that hurt you. That getting, I know it sounds mushy gushy and, hippy dippy, but getting that, I am very left brain. I'm very pragmatic, and that going to counseling and getting clear on what's my responsibility and what's not, where I need to own it and where I need to forgive it, was incredibly helpful to me to be able to move forward and endure as an adult. Yeah.
And I think that the thing too is it's HIPAA locked. You can say what you need to say in there. And your friend can't go and, because here's the thing, like, we absorb a lot, and what you absorb, it's like, where do I put that? And so when you're like, you think your friends are a safe place, and our friends are a safe place and all the things, but they're absorbing too. They're absorbing what we're saying too. And therefore they need to put it somewhere. But when you have a therapist, HIPAA locked, they can't do anything. So that's the other cool thing about it. That's what I love about it. I can say whatever I need to say, get this stuff out, and
of course,
can't go anywhere. So it's a safe place.
Yeah, and that's great to have, and everyone needs that. But a therapist, a friend can listen, but a therapist goes a step further and both listens and helps you detangle. To me, if I was to put one word on it, it's detangle. It's like, well, Josh, the reason you act like that is because of this. And so you need to forgive this. But also when these sorts of feelings come up, don't do that again. Like let's think of a strategy right now while you're not in that emotional state that you can at least kind of prompt yourself of like, okay, okay, I just need to step away, or I'm not going to respond to that email for 24 hours. A therapist can go beyond just a listening friend and really help you detangle the situations you've been through.
Yeah, no, they're good. I'm a huge fan of, even if you're in like a good mindset, I'm a big fan of using therapy just to keep you from hitting burnout, or I don't know. I'm a big fan of it. But Josh, I really appreciate you coming on and speaking to help us gain perspective, to help people be seen. Your story is powerful. I do want to say his book, The Grown-Up's Guide to Teenage Humans, one of the reasons I enjoy it so much is it's broken down very simply. You have a challenge, the challenges your teens face, you have the goal, you have the what to expect, and you have the what to do. So if you're somebody who's like bogged down by a lot of words on the page, he has it broken down step by step, very simple, so that you can absorb it. It's clear, it's cut. It's a fantastic book, very easy to read. So again, The Grown-Up's Guide to Teenage Humans. Josh, thank you so much.
Megan, my pleasure. Thank you. Very much enjoyed it.
Thank you.